From the BBC in London, this is Annemarie Grey with Caribbean Magazine. For the first time in decades, 4 black MPs have won seats in the British Parliament. In a moment, they talk on this programme about their success and the future. All 4 MPs represent the opposition Labour Party. There's Keith Vaz, who won a dramatic victory in Leicester East in the English Midlands. He's the first Asian MP for 6 decades. Joining him is Paul Boateng, who's the first ever MP of African descent. Then there's Bernie Grant from Guyana and Diane Abbott, whose parents come from Jamaica. They're the first black MPs of Caribbean descent, and they all represent London constituencies. Bernie Grant was the first of them to hear that he'd won his seat in Parliament.
Being the returning officer for the Tottenham constituency, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Dixon
Workers' Revolutionary
Claire
Party,
Louise, 205. Etherington
Liberal SDP
Stuart
Alliance,
James, 8,983. Grant
Labour,
Bernard Alexander Montgomery, 21,900.
An historic and joyful moment, and we'll be hearing from Bernie Grant and the others in just a moment. First, though, let me introduce you to George John. He's the London editor of the Weekly Gleaner newspaper. Welcome to Caribbean Magazine, George.
Thank you.
Your paper obviously followed the British general elections closely. Did you think that people were excited at the prospect of the arrival of these new black MPs?
I wouldn't say excited. I would say that they were hopefully cautious because trends in the popular press, at any case, showed that they were under severe attack. Firstly, because they were left-wing socialists, and secondly, I'm certain of this, because they were black. Particularly Bernard Alexander Montgomery, in spite of his association with the great British Field Marshal Bernard Alexander Montgomery Grant.
Lovely, isn't it?
I have my name is nothing compared to that.
You don't stand a chance there. When you say attack, the popular press here were attacking, what do you mean?
All right. Well, these candidates were all associated with the far left of the Labour Party. Grant and the prophet who lost were on local authorities. Grant was the leader of the Haringey Council, and that council was one of those tagged with the loony left tag and held up to ridicule and so on. As a matter of fact, I could read something from The Guardian on the day they first sat in Parliament, the swearing-in day. This is the new Conservatives in Parliament who maybe did not ever see these people face to face. Let me quote it. They could tell Diane Abbott all right, since she's black and a woman, a conjunction never seen before in the history of our Parliament. They could tell Bernie Grant, since they'd seen him on TV and page 1 of The Sun. Though in the uncertain light of the chamber, they couldn't quite make out the horns and the long forked tail.
Ooh.
Well, this was being not attacking. This was merely taking a stand on how the right wing looked at people like Bernie Grant and Diane Abbott and so on.
You, the paper, I should say, was encouraging people to get out and vote. I mean, so did a lot of papers. Do you think apathy is a problem?
Yes. Most people I spoke to, most black people I spoke to, Caribbean people I spoke to, I said, are you voting in the election? They'd say no. Oh, I've never voted.
Why do you think that was?
The original migrants, I expect, spent so much time working and making money to buy their homes or whatever, that they never bothered to take part in the politics. And the young generation, I fear, don't look on the establishment very kindly, and they feel that voting might link them with the establishment. That's my reaction to it.
The Labour Party, of course, has long claimed to be the natural party, if you will, for black voters here in Britain. Did they make much play on that to secure the black vote generally this time round?
Let me put it this way. There's a socialist tradition in Caribbean politics. And coming here, this tendency was transferred to blacks in Britain. One of the things that makes it a bit uncertain is this report that appeared in The Guardian last week about the Harris Research Center taking an exit poll. This poll said there was a swing in voting intentions of 14% to the Conservatives among the Asians and 0.5% among Afro-Caribbeans. So unless Labour shows that it is the party of the blacks, as they tend to say,
the Conservatives are going to gain some of our
Conservatives are
votes?
going to get some people.
Well, George, I promised that you would be able to hear the new MPs discussing their role in Parliament, and our listeners, of course, and that's what we've got to do now.
All right.
Don't go away, though. I'll be coming back to you afterwards. The discussion, by the way, is chaired by Jerry Timmins. Jerry?
Thanks, Annemarie, and welcome Diane Abbott, Bernie Grant and Paul Boateng, all new MPs to the Westminster Parliament, and hopefully Keith Vaz, the fourth black MP to be elected this time round, will be with us soon, but at the moment, unfortunately, he's stuck in traffic, but hopefully he'll be here later. Anyway, congratulations to you all. Diane, let me begin with you. Yours is a double first, really. You're not only one of the first black MPs for 6 decades in Britain, but you're also the first black woman MP, so special congratulations to you. How significant is it, do you think, that we now have 4 black MPs in Parliament?
I think it's terribly symbolic. I think it kind of marks a political coming of age for the immigrant community, the black immigrant community in this country. I think it's significant in the sense that we hopefully can serve as some kind of role models. And I hope if we can work together successfully, if we can build the right kind of links with the black community outside Parliament, that we can have an impact out of proportion to our numbers, both nationally and internationally.
Paul, it's a coming of age for the black communities. Is it a coming of age for the British establishment as well, perhaps?
I'm not sure about the establishment. I'm not particularly concerned about the establishment. What I'm concerned, however, to establish is that black politicians are not simply silhouettes. We're not one-dimensional black figures who only have a view on so-called black issues, that we're fully rounded political personalities. And it's a battle getting that over. And that's a battle that we have to take on board if, in fact, we are to have a genuine multiracial democracy in which people are not judged purely by the colour of their skin.
Bernie Grant, what do you see as your main responsibilities as MPs? Do you particularly want to fight for black people's rights in Britain?
Well, I think that we have to fight for the rights of all our constituencies. I think that's uppermost in our minds. But having said that, we have to recognise that black people are disproportionately disadvantaged within the society. So that if we are socialists, we have to look at their particular needs and put that foremost.
Now, you're all here sitting around the table. You all obviously know each other for some time now. Do you plan to work together in Parliament as a sort of black caucus?
You know, I'm always amazed at this, Jerry, because I've never heard the question asked of a group of white MPs, do you intend to work as a white caucus? Why, when 3-4 black people are gathered together, do we suddenly become a caucus? We're friends who've known each other for years, who've worked together for years. We should continue to do so with each other and with other white members of Parliament.
I want to bring Diane Abbott in. Let me just defend myself from that for a moment. There is already talk about a caucus for women in Parliament. I mean, Diane Abbott, do you see a role for a black caucus as well as perhaps a caucus for women to lobby for these the rights that people need?
I hope that we will work as a caucus. I mean, it's a very common political structure in the United States where there's a black congressional caucus. I think the danger, unless we work closely together and unless we work around agreed aims and objectives, you know, the rest of the PLP and the rest of the Parliament will play divide and rule and will become, as individuals, isolated and marginalised. I think it's very important that we work very closely together.
Bernie Grant.
I think that it's important for us to work together as a caucus as well, because I feel that the whole areas that are covered by Parliament are so vast that we need to try and cover as many areas as possible. So we would need to discuss amongst ourselves which ones of us will be going on certain committees and so on.
Right, and to be very clear about this, does that mean a caucus on black issues or a caucus of friends working for the
I'm not at all clear about this idea of a caucus. It may be that I'm politically naive. I imagined that I was accountable to my constituency Labour Party, which selected me and which worked in order to send me to Parliament. I imagine that I'll be working closely with those of my colleagues with whom I care, with whom I share a special interest and concern about a range of issues, to make sure we maximise our time effectively. Whether you call that a caucus or a group or a working arrangement seems to me to be a matter of complete indifference, and I think we're in danger of getting into semantics.
I'm quite clear about the need for black caucus in Parliament, but obviously we 4 actually have to meet and discuss and refine our ideas. and sort of unite around a position that all of us feel we can defend. There's absolutely no doubt that if we allow ourselves to be split off from each other, then we'll be marginalised and our effectiveness will be massively reduced. That's my view.
Bernie Grant.
Yeah, I mean, I would support that. I mean, I don't think that Paul is saying anything different from us. All he's saying is, in effect, that we haven't sat down and worked anything out, and that's the position at the moment.
Okay, now, Bernie Grant, I was interested just now that you said you were very keen to represent the views of all the people in your constituency. A couple of days ago, we had a reporter out on the streets in Tottenham, where you are the MP, and he went around asking people, now that there are 4 black MPs in Parliament, should those MPs be putting black issues top of their list of priorities?
No, that's cutting us in half. No, we should deal with everybody as equals.
I think he should do for everybody as, not just a one-man thing, for each and every one, whether black or white.
I should be concerned with the well-being of everybody, really, not just for blacks. Because he's supposed to be fighting against racism. He shouldn't become a racist himself, should he?
You can't have black priority, can you?
No.
That would be fair.
You're in Romans country, do as the Romans do. It assists, but having a blacks in there, but not to have a black priority, no, that's out of order, totally. They're not there to bring up the issue of racism.
I see myself as a person, and whatever strive I do, I'm going to do it because I am a person and not because I am black or white. It doesn't make any difference. I think it's down to the individual to make a go and see how far they get.
There's unemployment out there, there's a lot of black people without jobs and stuff, and if Bernie Grant can sort that out first and then get into the rest of the issues afterwards, like racism, police and all that sort of stuff, like the riot for instance, I mean, if he didn't speak up, then no one else was going to speak for him, you know what I mean?
So you think that's more important than the other sort of mainstream issues?
Oh yeah, for us.
Right, now overwhelmingly those people were agreeing with what you said, Bernie Grant, earlier on, but there was just a dissenting voice there at the end saying that some of these problems of unemployment and housing hit black people very hard in certain areas of Britain, and that they want to see you tackle those problems as a group of MPs. Is that one of the issues that, as a caucus, to use that word again?
I think the point is, right?
You don't like that word, caucus?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to proceed on the basis that we are working together as a caucus. We are black members of Parliament who have a particular interest in racial disadvantage and racial discrimination. Of course we do, because that concerns our constituents, black and white. They want to see us make a success of our multiracial society. And when you are in Parliament and you come from a particular experience in a particular community, of course when you're discussing an issue like employment, whilst you're concerned to raise generally the level of employment, you recognise the way that you have to have a certain amount of fine-tuning in order to make sure that those employment changes, those employment policies, reach the whole community and do not exclude blacks, as very many of them at the moment do. There's nothing in that that smacks of anything at all untoward. That's a member of Parliament's job on behalf of all his constituents.
I think we're not going to resolve, the way in which we're going to work together in Parliament on air, right, on this programme. But just to get back to what those people were saying, I think the thing for us as black MPs is there's a whole range of issues, housing, employment, foreign policy, where there is a specific black dimension. And what has been happening in the past is that specific black dimension on issues like employment policy or job creation has been ignored and excluded, and I think that's wrong. Any MP for Hackney North, any MP for Tottenham, if they were going to be an effective MP, ought to take on the concerns of black people, not least because at least half of my electorate are black, right? So it's not that we're going to be putting black people first, we're just going to be paying attention to the black dimension in a way it's not been paid attention to before. And obviously, you see, whatever we say, whatever any of us were to say here and now, right, there is no doubt in my mind that the election of 4 black MPs to the House of Commons have raised expectations in the black community. And whether we like it or not, we're between a rock and a hard place. We have to be seen to deliver to meet those aspirations over and above our responsibilities, which are first and foremost to our constituency.
Bernie Grant, can you pick up on that point? Because if these expectations exist in parts of the community, isn't there a danger that a certain amount of disillusion will set in because you are all MPs in the opposition party and you're on the back benches of the opposition party, which reduces your influence to a certain extent in Parliament itself. How effective can you be, do you think?
Well, I've made it clear to all the constituents in Tottenham, and particularly black constituents, that I'm not a miracle worker. And I've in fact put the onus on them to organise themselves in order to fight for whatever it is that they require within the system. Of course, I'm prepared to help to organize it, but I think that particularly with this government, it will be incumbent on black people themselves to organize themselves in groups and organizations so that they could, in fact, tackle the discrimination that they face. But can I come back to one point that was raised by one of the contributors, which was the question of when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I mean, I think that that's wrong, because I think that the black people in Britain are, quite a lot of them are born here, they've grown up here, and this is their country, so they have to help to shape the country. It's not a question of them operating within a foreign country at all.
Very quickly, can I try and pin you down on some specific policies that you'd like to see implemented at national level in Britain to tackle some of the issues that you've raised of high unemployment, bad housing among black people? I was just going to say, in local government in Britain, some local governments have tackled these problems with affirmative action, trying to get good qualified black people into places of responsibility. I mean, is that kind of affirmative action what you're looking for?
We would like to see, first and foremost, local government restored, in the sense of actual local authorities being allowed, by being given the resources and being allowed to raise the resources, actually to reflect the needs and concerns of their communities, so they can support the employment projects, so they can utilize machinery like contract compliance in order to make sure that individual employers who use public money actually have a fair and representative workforce that includes black people, that includes women, that includes those people who have been excluded from the jobs market so far. These methods are being truncated, are being stopped by a Conservative government hell-bent on destroying local government.
Just to give a concrete example, I'd like to see some work done, research, etc., and a lot of money put into research for sickle cell anemia. You know, I think that that's a tremendous killer of black people, and not enough work has been done in the health services. At the moment, the health debate, there is no talk about sickle cell anemia, and that's the kind of input that as black MPs will be able to...
I think in terms of employment, I think if one's talking about job opportunities for black people, the government has to look at its own record as an employer. Now, 10 years ago or more, research was done which showed how black people are discriminated against in the civil service. Even recently, I saw reports about how black nurses are discriminated against in the health service. This is 20 or 30 years ago, since my mother's generation came here to work as nurses. Now, a government that's committed to helping black people ought to be looking at its own record as an employer and implementing good employment practices, you know, in the health service and in the civil service.
So perhaps you'd like to see something similar to what's happening in the States, where the government is setting an example on employment?
Oh, very, very much so, very much so. And that's what I would hope that we would push for as a group of black MPs within the House of Commons.
Just let me move on to one big issue that was running before the campaign, and that is of black sections in the Labour Party. Now, you all kept, the press reported you as saying that you all kept a low profile during the campaign. Now, one of your fellow Labour candidates, Sharon Atkin, criticised Neil Kinnock, the leader of the Labour Party, and called the Labour Party a racist party in the run-up to the election. Now, as a result of those comments, she was dropped. Did that tough disciplinary action on a colleague of yours in any way affect the way you ran your campaign?
I'm at a loss to see how it can ever be suggested that this is an issue that was a concern to people on the doorsteps in the course of the election campaign, or that we were keeping a low profile on it. I never had once, in the course of meeting literally tens of thousands of people in the course of that campaign, had the issue of Sharon Atkins, which is an ongoing disciplinary issue about which I have no intention whatsoever of commenting on this or any other programme. I never had that raised once on the doorsteps. What I did have raised, and what is of concern to us all, is how we make sure within the Labour Party that our constitution reflects the multiracial nature of our society, how we make sure as a party that we reflect the needs and concerns and aspirations of black people institutionally. That remains an ongoing debate which must and will be conducted in a friendly and fraternal manner.
And Paul is right, it wasn't raised that often, but I think disciplinary action against Sharon was wrong, and I hope, I mean, it's not, the thing isn't properly concluded, but I do hope that when the NEC comes to look at the thing again, that there can be a fair and just conclusion.
Right, Bernie Grant, the Gleaner newspaper, which is the London edition of the Jamaican paper, said that the black MPs won your seats by behaving like good little girl and good little boys. I mean, this was basically saying that you were towing the party line in the run-up to the election. Now you're in Parliament. Will we see you being vociferous on issues that you care deeply about, or will you toe the party?
We've always been vociferous on the things we care deeply
little
about.
Boys and girls, right? And there is no shame in being loyal to your party in the general election campaign. I think that's the minimum you can expect of a parliamentary candidate, that they are loyal to their party in general
Bernie
election.
Grant.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Gleaner can say what it's like. I mean, the Gleaner isn't, as far as I'm aware, the official organ of the Labour Party or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is that if we had not taken a very responsible and disciplined position that we took you wouldn't have been speaking to us here tonight because it would have been white members of parliament. And I wonder what the Gleaner would have said then. So that as far as we're concerned, we acted responsibly. Diane is absolutely right. We are loyal to the party, and that was the position. But it doesn't mean that we agree with what happened, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to raise those issues wherever possible.
Right. Let me just briefly, before we finish, internationalise this discussion a bit. Let's return to Paul Boateng's acceptance speech when he heard that he had become a member of the British Parliament.
Sisters and brothers, I must say this now. We can never be free. We can never be free in Britain. We can never be free in Brent until South Africa is free too. And I say this, Brent South today, Soweto tomorrow. Thank you very much, brothers and sisters.
Well, Paul Boateng's speech there, when he heard that he'd become a Member of Parliament. Bernie Grant, do you see that there is a link between the struggle for proper representation in Britain and the struggle that's going on in South Africa?
Oh, yeah, obviously. I mean, I agree with what Paul said. It's absolutely clear to me that, that black people, not only in Britain, but black people in the States and other parts of the world have got to agitate in order to ensure that proper sanctions are taken against South Africa.
Some people found that speech provocative, though, because there was an underlying implication that things had been as bad for black people in Britain, possibly, as they are in South Africa. Paul, did you intend any kind of meaning like that?
What I intended to make absolutely clear from the word go was that as a Member of Parliament who was black and drawn from that experience, my determination and my concern and commitment was to making sure that it was not believed that the struggle for a truly multiracial society was over. Because we had won in Britain, that struggle will never be complete in this country or in the world whilst the abomination of the apartheid regime continues and whilst the British government remains complicit in continuing that abomination. That was what I meant, that was what was understood.
And there's no doubt that a lot of black youth actually do identify with the struggles in Soweto. It does strike a chord here. I think that one of the things black MPs, British politics, particularly in recent years, has actually been quite inward-looking and not that much concerned with foreign affairs. And I think one of the things a group of black MPs working together can do is actually bring that international dimension to British politics.
What must also be said was that in the course of my election campaign, we had 4 factory gate meetings specifically on this issue. And on every one of them, there were black and white workers together outside those factory gates in their lunchtime supporting anti-apartheid and raising money to end the abomination of the apartheid regime in South Africa. It's a black and white issue, not simply the preserve of blacks, it's a world concern.
Well, Diane Abbott, you said you'd like to see more concentration put on international issues. What about the Caribbean? Would you like to see Britain reinforcing its ties with the Caribbean?
We would like to see Britain ending its support for the American intervention in the Caribbean and Central American basin and continuing to be the poodle of President Reagan, who treats the Caribbean as if it were his own backyard. It isn't.
You're both sounding like Errol Barrow, the late Errol Barrow of Barbados there. Bernie Grant, do you go along with that?
Oh, yeah, I'd support that totally. But, I mean, there are a number of things that Britain should do in terms of aid at the moment. People in the Caribbean governments, when they get aid, they have to actually buy the goods from Britain. We are saying that sort of thing is not on. That we're also saying that a number of commercial links that have been broken should be reestablished. For example, we know that Biwi is not able to fly properly and have a correct service to Heathrow Airport, and we think that sort of thing should be reestablished urgently, and we would be making I certainly would be making representations to the government to ensure that sort of thing happens.
Would you be keen individually or together to get onto the Foreign Affairs committees and to put your input into the Caribbean, Diane Abbott?
Well, obviously, when we meet to discuss how we're going to operate, we'll sort out precisely who intervenes where.
We are keen to play a full and active role in the British Parliament. That's what we're keen to do as black members of Parliament, as members of Parliament. That's what we will be doing, together and with our white colleagues in the Labour movement.
MPs Paul Boateng, Diane Abbott and Bernie Grant talking to Jerry Timmins. Unfortunately, MP Keith Vaz didn't make it on time, but it was nice to have 3 London MPs all together on radio for the first time. And listening to that with me is George John, the London editor of the Weekly Gleaner.
It was interesting to note that there seems to be a bit of confusion about the role of these black MPs, whether they should form a black caucus or not. Now, black caucus, as I think Diane Abbott said, is active in the United States politics. But the political system in the United States is totally different from the one here. And I don't know that a black caucus would have any effect whatever, even if it was a bigger one than the 4 MPs. It might be effective if they were in government. Because the problem with these 4 MPs, and I think I should go back and talk about those street interviews that you had, where one fellow said that he expected Bernie Grant to sort out the problems of black people. In Parliament, Bernie Grant can't sort out anything, nor can Diane Abbott. They are in opposition and they are on the back bench. And while they could pressure their party to do things, they've got no influence with Margaret Thatcher and her cabinet. And that is one of the things that we've got to be quite clear about.
I don't mean to cut you, George, but I wonder whether, because these 4 black MPs are supposed to be there representing us as a black community, I mean, that's the way a lot of people will see it. Do you think people are going to get really mad when they don't do anything for black people?
Well, what my point is that the first thing they've got to do is to lower those high expectations among certain sections of the black community. Because surely, if people expect them to do a lot, and they don't do anything at all, or they do just a little bit, they can't show any real results, what happened on the 11th is going to be counterproductive. I would like to see them operate at a level of the Labour Party which would get them into the higher ranks of the party.
But in order to do that, won't they have to toe the line?
But if they don't toe the line, they're going to get expelled from the party. There was talk about Sharon Atkins.
Yes.
And Sharon Atkins, I suppose I should explain, was the original candidate for Nottingham East. And she made a speech at a Labour Party Black Sections meeting saying that the Labour Party was racist, that the leader himself was identified with racism in her own mind, and she was dropped as a candidate as a result. Now, it may be that if she had been the candidate, Labour would have won that seat and there would have been 5 members, because the man who replaced her lost by just 1,400 votes. And this is one of the significant things, that here was somebody who refused to back down on militancy or activism and was dropped, and the successor lost. So I think it was Bernie Grant who pointed out that if they'd carried on as they used to carry on, there would be no black members in Parliament at all. And that is very, very significant. You've got to play down the line.
Finally, George, do you think that Diane Abbott and Bernie Grant's presence in Parliament will be a good thing for the Caribbean region?
First, it's going to be a good thing for Britain. It is a good thing at this stage to have black members in Parliament. After all, the black community is becoming much more visible, I should say, at all kinds of levels. And in Parliament, fine. The Caribbean is no longer British. It is American. The Grenada thing was the decisive moment in Caribbean history when the switch from Britain to the United States. Clearly, if Mrs. Thatcher landed in Grenada or anywhere tomorrow, I doubt you'd get that kind of response.
Well, George John, thanks very much for coming in and listening in to the program with us and making your comments. That's it for Caribbean Magazine for this week. Join us again next week. This is Annemarie Grey from the BBC in London.